Tonight we have with us a distinguished guest. Dr. Kivanc Ulusoy is currently a Fulbright Fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School. He is Associate Professor of Politics at Istanbul University. He was previously a Jean Monnet Fellowship at the Robert Schuman Center for Advanced Studies at the European University Institute in Florence and Fellow at the Madrid Diplomatic School. His areas of research include regime change and democratization, Turkish politics, Turkey-EU relations, and Spanish politics. Among his several and recent publications are Saving the State Again, Turks Face the Challenge of European Governance. He is here with us today to talk about religion and politics in the Middle East, Turkey, and a comparative perspective. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Kivanc.
Thank you very much. I'm really honored to be here, and I'm very happy to be with you here. This is my first time in Chicago. I like your city very much. It's a beautiful city, and when I saw this Michigan lake, and I remembered my town Istanbul, and I really missed sea and Bosphorus. So it was a nice idea to come here. I would like to thank both my friend Bülent and also the president of American Islamic College, Ali, and they were kind enough to bring me here. And actually, I will have a brief talk on about 20-25 minutes on general situation in the Middle East with respect to Turkey's relations vis-a-vis what's happening in the region. And also I would like to give you a brief, let me say, introductory remarks regarding what's happening in Turkey, what made Turkey special in the case of Middle East. So instead of going into detail of the religion-state debates or religion-politics debate, I would like to more focus on some remarks which I find important, which might, of course, you can amplify, you can enlarge in our discussion. So we have, in fact, the map appears here better, but more colorful. But this is Turkey, as you see. We have many friends, many neighbors, from Bulgaria to Greece, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Iran, Iraq, and Syria. So Turkey has been surrounded by countries from very different, political and historical background. What makes them probably common is they were in the past part of the Ottoman Empire, but from south to northeast to west, then they chose their own way of becoming independent states. Turkey also became an independent nation state and tried to find its way in contemporary world, let me say. And recently you might have heard more about Turkey in two respects, as far as I imagine. One is related with Turkey-EU relations. Turkey has been, trying to be part of the European Union for about 4 or 5 decades, really, since the late 1950s onwards, and still it is an accession country. It is accepted as an official candidate for membership, and the accession negotiations started. It was a very important, challenging, let's say, decision for the EU, because Turkey, in terms of the majority of population, is a Muslim country, and being part of the EU as a Muslim country was a challenge for the Europeans. So it took, very difficult negotiations to take decision for the European Union members. And of course, in the end, from 2004 onwards, Turkey started membership talks, and officially in 2005, in the October 2005, the membership talks started, and Turkey is now on the way to completing many negotiation criteria. But very interestingly, you have been probably hearing Turkey recently in another topic, especially with the Arab Spring. Turkey turned to be a country debated in the context of the transformations, big transformations, impressive transformations that we face in the Arabs in the Middle East too. Geographically, this is understandable. Because for many countries, when you follow the debates both in the US probably or in Europe in general, as I follow more closely, Turkey has been considered as an important example, model for what the West expect from Middle Eastern countries to be in probably in 2-3 respects. Stable economy, stable political system, democratic system, and in a way also absorbing political Islam, religion as a legitimate actor in politics. So Turkey has, in a way, lived a kind of important experience over the past decade in terms of absorbing, also accepting political Islam as a legitimate actor in democratic politics, and the political Islam in Turkey turned to be not an aggressive, backward, or let me say destabilizing force, but turned to be a kind of moderate, knowing how to play the democratic game, or being part of the democratic game in the country. So this was an important asset for both for the country, or for and this was considered as an important development both for Turkey and also for the Middle East. So when you look at the debates on Turkey, when you hear Turkey, you either see EU connection or the Middle Eastern connection. And recently, of course, you have been here in Turkey, as far as I know, as I imagine, in terms of what's happening in Syria, because we have more or less 900 kilometers of borders with Syria, and what happens in Syria affects us very much, and inevitably we are inside of the deep clashes of sectarian divisions, of all kinds of problems in Syria too. This is another topic that we started to hear when we speak about Turkey. So let me start. I prepared you a few slides about Turkey's democracy. I mean, what makes Turkey's as an interesting case, I think could be best understood when you look at Turkey's democratization experience. This is not an experience of just a decade or just a few years. It has been an experience of more or less 5-6 decades. Since the end of the Second World War, Turkey entered to a multi-party regime, and party politics characterized the regime in Turkey. Of course, there are other ways of describing post-1946 periods. I mean, we faced with 3 military coup d'etats in 1960, 71, and 80. These were important interruptions, but in general, the regime was a multi-party regime. So it's recently you have been hearing many debates about elections in the Middle East. So doing an election is a very serious thing, really. It's not an easy thing, and counting votes. These are very basic factors which are very difficult, and counting them in transparency and reliable conditions. Turkey, in a way, is experienced in this case. Now, for instance, in Turkey, you start the elections in one Sunday morning and it ends at 5 p.m. Then you know the results in 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. So the Middle East, in a way, has been experiencing real elections in real terms just recently. So in a way, it's this serious process, which is basic for Middle Eastern democracy, has been practiced by Turkish politics and politicians for some time. Very interesting different characteristic which we can look at in the case of Turkey is Turkey's Western connection. As I mentioned, Turkey, is on the way to EU membership. Takes long time, very annoying debates between Turks and Europeans, etc. But in a way, this Western connection is not just related with the EU matters, but also related with security matters. Turkey is a NATO member, and frankly speaking, it has been criticized very much in the Middle East over the past few decades because of being a NATO member. Many Arab friends, colleagues didn't trust Turkey because they thought Turkey is an ally with the United States or Israel. So so the messages coming from Turkey was not very welcome for a long time. Nowadays, we are facing, in that respect, an interesting transformations or transformation of Turkey's image in the Middle East too. Now, the Arabs are not looking at Turkey as an American agent or as an Israeli ally, but as a country which contributes to the stability in the Middle East in many respects. Which is a country able to speak to West, to Middle East at the same time. In that respect, it has changed. The image of Turkey changed too. The Turkey's transformation. Let me mention here one important point. Goes hand in hand with both political transformation and economic transformation. Turkey, since the 1980s, has been gradually opening its economy, with, of course, multiple crises. In 1994, 1997, 2001, very dramatic crisis we lived. But in a way, Turkey is an important example for the Middle Eastern countries in terms of serious liberalization of economy. One of the main difficulties in the case of Egypt is how to liberalize the economy. The public sector, which was very large, probably the largest in the Middle East, is in the hands of the army, and the army doesn't let it. Also, how a kind of moving economy could be generated is a serious problem. Turkey, in that respect, has been gradually doing it and successfully doing it, and there is both big business located in and around Istanbul, and also in Anatolia, small and medium enterprises quite strongly generating or supporting the local economic development too. So this is a way where economic and political liberalization simultaneously take place, and simultaneously opens the economy and makes the political classes, political debates much more moderate than we face in the Middle East, I think. And also, this brings another important issue, which is good administration, good governance. You might know Turkey's current prime minister was mayor of Istanbul, which is the greatest city in Istanbul. And when the first the Islamist party came as a serious political force to Turkey's political agenda, it took mainly the local, very strong local municipalities, Istanbul, Ankara. And and many people voted at that time, and strangely asked the question, why people vote for the Islamists? In 1994, this was the first debate. because they thought that Islamists, they were the only one whom they could trust to govern their cities in a transparent, in a clean way. So in the 1990s, Istanbul was suffering from a very serious crisis of governance. No clean water, no sewage, functioning sewage system. Garbage were all around. So the Islamists were particularly strong in terms of governance. And this is also a very interesting example that we can establish now with Middle Eastern cases and also the Arab Spring. I mean, I mentioned few of them as you see, but this one is probably the most the strongest one. As an EU expert, I have always been going to Europe, to many countries. So going to east of Ankara was not a very common thing for me. But last year, over the past 2 years, I did many visits to Damascus, to Cairo, to Tunis, etc. The most serious thing that I faced with there is the governance crisis. People in Cairo were seriously suffering from collection of garbages or clean water, and they voted for the. I was doing few interviews. I don't speak Arabic, but I have a close friend translating me, and I was asking to many people in the suburbs of Cairo, and I was asking why you voted for this and why you voted for the Muslim Brothers. They say they were the only ones they could trust. But they were expecting them not to bring Sharia, but to bring clean water, to collect the garbages, to clean the cities, etc. So there was a very deep governance crisis, and which brought those parties as the alternative to the dictatorship that was there. And this was very interesting similarity that we face in the late 1980s or early 1990s in Turkey. There was a serious governance crisis in many local governments there. So the Islamists came there, and when you look at their messages, it was not an Islamic message completely. It was half Islamic message, but mostly of a message of service, of serving for the people. So this was a very interesting thing, and I think Turkish voters understood that at that time. So this was also an important comparable, let me say, point that I can mention in addition to some previous ones. So this the other. I will return to this European impact again. The democratization doesn't take place only from the internal, let's say, internal struggles. It needs always an outside support, or outside leverage, or international support, international leverage. So, and Turkey's democratization is not an exception in that case. Turkey has been, on the way to EU membership, negotiating EU matters for a long time. But EU appeared, European connection appeared from the early 1980s almost as an important leverage of democratization in Turkey. And this became very clear in the late 1990s. When Turkey, faced with a deep financial crisis, which brought again the current Justice and Development Party in power after the collapse of a tripartite coalition government there, and Justice and Development Party at that time, at that conjuncture, emerged as a kind of very moderate political force. Yes, this was the first time, but it was at the same time they were able to bring a larger coalition of forces behind themselves, because economic classes needed a kind of EU, let me say, EU umbrella to make the things correct, or they in many respects they needed a kind of roadmap to see how to democratize the country. EU was providing all these, and the debate when you look at the 1990s of of Turkey, a very nationalistic debate. We were thinking that EU wanted to divide us. We were thinking that EU wanted to exploit us, etc. But the Justice and Development Party, in that conjuncture, which is unexpectedly made a kind of interesting twist, because the Islamists traditionally were against Europe. They thought Europe and Turkey were belonging to different civilizations. That is West, we are East. That is Christianity, we are Islam. So we can't be together. But they made an interesting twist of discourse and also practice, which bring a larger coalition of forces behind them. So very secular leftist groups, liberals, Istanbul-based big business, Anatolian business groups, and they were behind that. Suddenly, they were behind this moderately Islamist party. You know, they were in that case. EU brought an important, let's say, aggregative force, aggregative framework for the current government, Justice and Development Party government in 2001-2002, to moderate its discourse, to bring it as a legitimate force to political arena, let me say. And Justice and Development Party, from when you look at, I said here, from 1999 to 2002, there were 9 reform packages, but since 2000, sorry, this is the date is there actually wrong. I'm sorry. From 1999 to 2004, because 2005 the accession negotiations started. So 6 of those reform packages were issued by Justice and Development Party government. So this was quite an important liberalizing. They were quite an important liberalizing or democratizing reform packages, and they were done by the government really. And but they're thinking that they would bring kind of important important leverage to change, to transform Turkey's political system. One of the important changes took place in terms of the transformation of civil-military relations, which is an important issue for the current Middle East too. The civilian government turned to be much more effective, because apart from 3 military coups d'état that I mentioned, there was another one which took place in 1997. So in the end, Turkish politics or Turkish politicians, civilian governments were generally weak vis-a-vis the army, and they needed this outside support to, in a way, circle and marginalize the role of army in politics. This was an important instrument actually. And there is also very interesting, I didn't mention here, very important reform package, which is the 3rd reform package. And the implementation of that reform package also is done by Justice and Development Party. That included the abolition of death penalty, extension of the property rights of the non-Muslim minorities, which refers to Greek Orthodox, Armenians, and the Jews. So, and the 3rd one was was permitting broadcasting in languages other than Turkish, which refers to Kurdish language. So there were 3 important points there, which was included in that reform package, which brought a kind of liberalizing, pressures, deepening democratization pressures for Turkey too. So this overall, let me briefly state that the European connection was a very important connection of Turkey over the past decade in a way to transform the country. I put here in a nutshell an interesting debate probably, which you might like to hear, but I won't make it too long. I probably you might have seen in my biography. when I did my PhD, I looked at the Spanish case, which is an interesting case of democratization. And I saw there that Spaniards were looking Europe as an important point to be reached, to transform their country, to change their country. There was a very interesting, let me say, debate in Spain in terms of Europeanization, in terms of not, of course, changing their identity in a total way, but modernizing their country. This was also a this was a true point for Turkish case too. Turkey, in Turkish psyche, Turkish idea, there is this idea of, you know, in a way to be part of Europe, at the same time to be similar to Europe, but also to keep something which is important for us too, you know, not a complete transformation, but to be like Europe, but not to be assimilated to Europe. Very interesting debate, and you can see it in the Spanish case too. This is why do I say this? Because this is an important motive in both Turkey's domestic politics, apart from EU connection and everything. An important point in Turkey's domestic politics, it's very at the gist of many debates, and also Turkey's foreign policy. I mentioned when I started my talk how Turkey's foreign policy shifted towards the Middle East over the past few years, but this was always in conjunction with, in connection with how Europe perceives us, or how we situate us in Europe too. This was a big debate. There was a big debate in Turkey also of whether Turkey changes its axis, whether Turkey completely moves to east or leaves Europe, leaves Western connection, etc. This was pretty similar to what I see in the case of Spain. Probably there are few nuances, but very similar, and which made Turkey, which pushes Turkey to develop a kind of self-reinforcing force of transformation, democratization, and modernization at the same time. This is an important part of it, I think, in our case. And but what we have done always is to take a European model, as if we took, for instance, the French Revolution and French model of nation state in the 1990s. In the 1920s, when the Republic was established. But now we have not seen how much Europe transformed itself from a kind of Europe of nation states fighting always with each other to a kind of Europe of multi-level governance, liberties, and more, let me say, more overcoming the difficulties of building a community. So this was the case. This is the case what we have been facing with this European connection to democratization. In a sense, in Turkey, has this serious constraint. Currently, Europe turns to, of course, we have always been hearing European crisis, and Europe is in crisis, but it has a kind of serious soft power beyond itself. And Europe provides a kind of interesting example for, not just for Turkey, but also for the Middle Eastern countries too, as far as I see. Not in terms of just aids and, you know, roadmaps, etc., but in terms of governance structures, in terms of how a multi-ethnic, multi-religious states can cooperate with each other, can overcome the difficulties of being one nation and one state or unified states, etc. So in a way, Europe offers interesting example of, let me say, of living together as multi-ethnic, multi-religious nation states. This, I'm probably speaking in a blurred way, but I will open it in a discussion. And I see that the frontiers of Europe also has been extended extensively over the past years. You see the Europe as European Union, but I think Europe enlarges towards the Mediterranean. Eastern Europe and towards the Mediterranean too. And you see it in many respects in the case of Turkey. Turkey, probably there are different, very conflicting definitions of identity, but Turkey turns to be more and more a Mediterranean country. It's difficult to characterize Turkey simply as an Islamic country, or simply as a Middle Eastern country, or simply as a country on the way to EU membership or European country. So, what I'm briefly trying to say is that identity is transformed in and outside of Europe, and Turkey is an important example of that. Let me conclude here, if you permit me, and try to open a kind of interesting, probably debate for you. Thank you very much for listening.
At the bottom, there was a comment saying that democratization was slipping back.
Sliding backwards, yes.
Yes. You didn't talk about that.
Yes, I didn't.
What do you have to? Why was it there if you don't want to talk about it?
Actually, I was planning to talk about that, but I was leaving something to open with respect to questions. And thank you very much for asking this. Actually, democracy has been sliding backwards because after the negotiations started in 2005 in Turkey. We kind of probably tiredness, a kind of, let me say, it's not easy to absorb many of the changes, legal and political changes that is done in such a short time. And there was also a slight fear of too fast democratization as far as I see. These are the psychological points that I faced in that when I look at the Turkish case. This is first reason. Secondly, there is more and more we see that the opposition parties turn to be seriously weakened. The Justice and Development Party over the past 10 years gained 3 elections, increasing its votes, and its leader, Tayyip Erdogan, turned to be a real strong leader. And also the party turned to be more and more strong. And this made very serious, this made very serious turns with respect to democracy. We see it, in some cases. We saw it for instance, in the case of Kurdish problem, in the case of the situation of Alevis. Also, we see in the case of the situation of non-Muslim minorities, the expectations probably were high. Probably it was not easy to absorb in such a short time, and from 2007 onwards, we found ourselves in a region between two regions which are deeply in crisis. EU, economic crisis, and Middle East, Arab Spring, and increasing. So this made Turkey turn to be more and more cautious about taking very serious, let me say, steps with regard to democratization. And the democracy turned to be quite, sliding on its path.
That you said the opposition parties were weakened.
Yes.
Were they weakened by the ruling party, or were they weakened because the population in general felt what they had now was really good and they would rather keep it?
Mm-hmm. That point is an important point. First of all, they were not able to cope with the changes in the country. So there was an expanding middle class, there was an expanding economy, and the main opposition parties, let's say Republican People's Party and Nationalist Action Party, were not simply, were too slow to accommodate themselves to changes. And of course, the people started to vote more and more for stability, for economic growth, which made the Justice and Development Party probably in a way stronger than it expected.
But if the people vote for this stability because they haven't had it in, let me say, 30 years before,
Yes.
then I feel that is part of the democratic process. And then rejecting the others seems to me as though they didn't have anything as good to offer, rather than that the ruling party suppressed the others.
But this is not. I'm speaking about the role of opposition as a serious force to constrain the absolute power of the ruling party. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? This is important. I mean, this is not this does not mean that what they offer is nonsense or important.
But
Is not important.
bring that about how do you give power back to the opposition if the opposition doesn't have much good to offer?
The sliding backwards of democratization is a matter of institutions too. The role of the parliament, the role of the political leaders, and also the institutional configuration. They turn to be completely paralyzed under the domination of a single party, whether it comes from the vote of the people or not. Democracy turned to be slightly shaky over the past few years.
I feel that if the population became dissatisfied with what the dominant party was offering, then democracy would take care of it, because the next time, not the last time, but the coming time, they would vote for someone who seems to give them the change that they now seem to need.
Yes.
And so are you saying that the dominant party at that point, if they felt threatened by the other parties, that they then would use undemocratic means to bring about their remaining dominant?
First of all, this is what we are going to see. Next.
Yes, you wouldn't want it to become like that.
Next year we have local elections and also presidential elections. And also, again, we are entering to a very delicate process of elections. So, which might, in a way, bring a kind of more balanced power distribution, both within the parliament and which relates to the institutions too.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for the very informative, enlightening lecture. There is, I was thinking about democracy, and I wonder what kind of democracy is talking about when, even before the establishment of the Turkish Republic, the Turkish hegemony during the First World War, Anwar, Javid, and all of them denied the right of minorities even to exist among the Arabs. The main reason for the Arab revolt against the Ottomans,
yes,
by denying them their national rights, the Kurds, the Arabs in Iskandaron, Diyarbakir, and all that. And where is the democracy in all that? All minorities. Until recently, the Turkish, Kurds moved to Iraq, left for, I don't know what kind of arrangement is that.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's a mockery of democracy when the minority has been oppressed for the last at least 80, 90 years.
So you refer to current Republican period.
Yeah, apart from even before Ataturk
Yes.
Republic, the Turkishization of the Ottoman Empire, even before the First World War, denying the minorities their national rights. They want them to be Turkicized, and even with the modern republic, the Kurds being fought, the Arabs in Diyarbakir and Iskenderun.
I'm from Iskender.
Huh? So you are Arab then? You are one of us. I'm an Arab also. Anyway, welcome. So, I mean, really, when you speak about democracy,
Yes.
then what kind of democracy is that?
Thank you very much for this question, actually, because one of the changes that we faced over the past decade was kind of a kind of positive dynamic towards resolving some of those questions, at least as much as possible. I mean, the extension of the rights of broadcasting in Kurdish was a kind of important movement, and the abolition of death penalty was, in that respect, an important. And also, many of the non-Muslim minorities started to get their properties, which are in the hands of state. Greek Orthodox Church and also Armenians started to renovate their churches, their old monuments, etc. So this was a kind of positive dynamic we have been facing. But at the same time, we have been facing some constraints of that. This is the situation that I can refer to Alevites in Turkey, for instance. Alevites is quite a big religious minority in Turkey, heterodox Islamic minority, but they are not recognized as a separate religious minority. And also Alevites in Iskenderun, Alexandretta, and Hatay province, where they are Nusayris, and they are brothers of Assad, and they are not recognized as a kind of separate identity. But the problem with these, looking at always in terms of identity problems, or let's say a minority problem, is that Turkey is a kind of trying to create a kind of nation, and the citizenship is a way of resolving many of those problems. Of course, Turkey faced serious problems in terms of Kurdish issue, and it turned to was a civil war in the east of country.
You mentioned that recent agreement while the Kurds pulled out now their troops and they moved into Iraq, and Iraq protesting. Do you have an idea what kind of deal happened?
Probably you might have followed. This is the second opening that we can refer. This Justice and Development Party engaged in the first kind of negotiating seriously with Kurdish guerrillas between 2007 and 2009. So in that period, they were not able to resolve the problem. Let me say, the Kurdish guerrillas, continued as they wanted. And now there is a better and more peaceful way of resolving the conflict. But the region is very delicate. They engaged in a kind of second opening, and they softened many of the problems regarding the Kurds. But the situation in Iraq and also the situation in Syria made any kind of very serious, very bold move very difficult. We expect the Kurds to leave their arms and start to live in this country as peaceful and as normal citizens. But they prefer to pull out with their arms outside of the country and keep on negotiating with the state. So, and this turned to be a very serious issue, because now we have another small entity, Kurdish entity in Syria too. Apart from the Kurds in Iraq, we have another entity in Syria, Kurdish entity in Syria, or a premature entity, let me say, which make Turkey inevitably to make some moves to resolve their problems. And I think in many ways now Kurds feel much more, let's say, liberated, emancipated in Turkey now. This is what I have been observing over the 3-4 months that this second opening started. So that is. Please, if you don't feel that this answer is satisfactory, I can open it.
No, I mean the recent deal, which is, are they going to have autonomy? I mean, the Kurdish autonomy, that
Yeah.
would have autonomy within to practice their language, their culture, as they are in Iraq.
Yes.
Northern Iraq, they get
Yeah.
their autonomy.
Yeah.
And now they have almost a semi-state, if you want. Are the Turkey going to recognize
As
them?
far as I know, in the deal, there is no promise of autonomy, as far as I know, because the deals are not blocked or closed from the beginning. And we are now negotiating what kind of solution or midway we are going to find it. You know, I know the Spanish case very well. You know, there were Catalan autonomy or Basque autonomy, and from the beginning, the solution of the problem was there. You know, you need to recognize their autonomies. But in the case of Turkey, in the case of Kurds in Turkey, we probably need to move in a kind of very delicate and continuous negotiations. We will see it, because most of the Kurds, as you might know, live in major western cities, not in the southeastern or eastern cities. Do you know? So it's not that easy to caricaturize like autonomy or independence of those kind of things.
Okay, good luck.
Yeah.
You mentioned that when the Islamist Party was first being considered for elections, that the non-religious, I presume to be non-religious people in Istanbul and Ankara or whatever, were more interested in clean water and garbage pickup and
Yes.
not so much in favor of Sharia law.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Islamist Party has continued to grow and become more powerful. Is there any fear among the non-Islamic Turks that there is a drift toward Sharia law?
I think there is a kind of, you know, honestly speaking, there is a kind of not fear, but you know, cautious approach nowadays towards the political Islam in Turkey. You know, we are not afraid of probably whether Sharia will come or not, but we want to know. We prefer more a moderate way of Islam than stronger and consolidated, very strong way of Islam. So when you mentioned that this clean water, it was in 1994, and there was that I said this because it's a kind of comparable situation of the Arab Spring of today, and there were you know, in those particular conjunctures, the Islamist message doesn't bring them to power. They need to have a larger, much more, let me say, compromising, moderate, and also incorporating messages based on serving to the people, serving to the country, serving to the resolving the basic problems of the people. So the Arabs in Cairo wanted better government, not Sharia. I'm pretty clear on that, and this was the case in 1994 in Turkey too. And probably in 2002, when the Justice and Development Party came to power, they were fed up with the coalition governments, and the country was just out of a dire, very difficult financial crisis, and the central left and central right parties were simply quarreling instead of dealing with the serious problems of the country. So,
like our country now.
yeah, so at that conjuncture, first welfare party and then the Justice and Development Party put a kind of moderate message, bringing a larger coalition of forces, saying that, okay, our main aim is to resolve the problems of the country, not to bring this or that new system to the country. So this was quite an intelligent strategy, I think, in that conjunctions.
In the last 20 years, has there been a change in the role of the military in Turkey?
Yes, this was actually, we have been speaking with my friend Bülent during all the day because he is preparing his thesis on this topic. Actually, I'm convinced that there has been a serious change of the military role of the military in Turkey. First of all, that's why I mentioned the EU cause. The EU leverage seriously functions to lower the the role of military in the country. So, for instance, there was a National Security Council, which was a decision-making body. So, under the pressure of the EU accession process, it turned to an advisory body. There was a kind of important decree law where in times of crisis, military was the first to resolve the problems. So it was an important protocol which gives the military to get rid of the civilian government in the local and provincial areas and to take the role of government. So this was also enrolled. And also, in the Security Council, apart from changing its character, the head of the Security Council turned to be a civilian authority. So there was, in a way, a serious changes in the organizational, in the constitutional role of the military. So this is on the paper. This is on the institutional level. You can easily observe it. And this occurred thanks to the EU pressures. But we are a NATO member. First of all, we should not forget that, and this makes this gives a special role inevitably to the army in Turkey, and also we live in a very seriously conflicting region, where the army always considered as an important asset. So still we keep a very strong army. Probably the second strongest one after the U.S. Army in the NATO, and also a strong army in the country. And this does not, of course, say us that when a crisis occurs, army will not intervene, or the civilians. If the civilians resolve the problems, we will see what will bring. But institutionally, the role of the army has been quite downgraded over the past decade. I should tell this.
This will be the last question.
Yes.
Sorry. What do you think Turkey's future is with the other Turkish states in Turkestan and Tartaristan and Caucasia?
Yeah.
Number one. Secondly, now with the end of Soviet Union, the role of NATO is not the same.
Yes.
And thirdly, is what you've said yourself, is basically relationship between Turkey and Europe is in limbo because of various reasons. And Arab states in general are very disorganized, and historically they've always sided with European countries against the Turks. So these three are my questions, if you can.
You mentioned who sided with
all the Arab states sided with England and France against Osmanli Turkey.
yeah. Okay.
So, and that feeling is still there against Turkey among Arabs.
Let me start from the last question, probably. Why I finish with this transforming the identities in Europe and around is particularly because of this reason. As sir, you also mentioned the late Ottoman period, where there was a big nationalization and the Arabs revolt, Armenians revolt, Kurds revolt, etc. So I think we have arrived a new stage in terms of identities. And I was able to observe it. Now, of course, people didn't easily forget the past, what happened in the past, and they leave. And unfortunately, this crisis in Syria bring the old past fears again to the agenda, as far as I see that. But I'm more convinced that the identities are changing. The Arabs are not looking the Turks as the agent of the West or as the agent of NATO or so. So there is a kind of softening of Turkey-Middle Eastern relations in terms of identities. So when I'm speaking about an Egyptian colleague now, I don't feel that he is looking at me or my many Turkish colleagues as as something different. So we started to look at more and more similarities. This is the case in the Balkans too. I think media worked very well for this. When you travel in the Balkans or in the Middle East, even in Israel, I was shocked in Israel when in my hotel trying to look for let's say news. I was impressed by 3 Turkish television soap operas put in a television in Israel, and the people very seriously watch it. When you travel to Damascus, of course I wish I could now, this was the case just a year ago. When you travel to Bosnia, Herzegovina, or let's say Albania or Romania, you will see. So the media gives an interesting interplay of images, changes, past, etc. So I think there is a kind of promising path which brings softening of, let me say, old cleavages. This is what I have been observing, and that's why I'm very sad about the longevity or the continuation of the war in Syria, because this may old sectarian cleavages, old cleavages again bring to agenda. I mean, just a year ago everyone was speaking about an Assad as a dictator and that everyone should get rid of. Now it turned to a kind of Alevite Sunni clash, which brings the very old, very deep hatred within the communities. And these longer and longer going on wars does not help that. I was very promising just a year, hopeful just a year ago about everything related with that. So I was thinking that the identities change and there is a positive path going away. That's why now I'm a bit worried, but I still try to be hopeful in that respect. Your first question was? Turkestan. Yeah, I know that. This is an important, I think, item that Turks tried once, just when the Soviet Union collapsed. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the Turks thought that all these Turks would be their brothers and they would come together, and we probably behaved a kind of aggressively opening ourselves to those regions, and it was a kind of disappointment. Now that also turned to be very positive, because there are very different organizations working there, civil society organizations, Turkish schools, Turkish brotherhoods. They are all trying to bring those people together. I was today, I just visited today a American Turkish center here. I was impressed by seeing that from Albania to Kyrgyzstan or Kazakhstan, communities living in the US are using their facilities to organize events, etc. So Turkey turned to be a kind of positive platform to bring them together. I think this is a way that Turkey should choose. Instead of exporting models, instead of aggressively saying that you are our brother, we should do this and that, let the people come and come together and use common platforms, and not an aggressively pursuing a foreign policy, but in a calm way trying to bring different brothers from different parts of Central Asia, Balkans and Middle East to similar platforms. This is an important issue, because we have been really passing from a very delicate process, and the Arab Spring opened a very promising path, but very difficult path to follow in terms of these relations. That is my final comment. I hope you find it satisfactory. Thank you very much.
I would now like to invite Dr. Ali Ulusoy up to present to you a token of our appreciation.
Okay, thank you very much. Very informative talk.
Ali, thank you very much, really.
And really, we refreshed our memories about Turkey, and this is a token of our appreciation.
Oh, thank you very much. Excellent.
That's a picture for our picture of